I'm Martha Wilson, 62 years old. I was living a peaceful life in a quiet suburb of Michigan. Since losing my husband 5 years ago, I had grown accustomed to living alone and was enjoying fulfilling days with book club meetings with neighbors and volunteer work at church. My daughter Sarah lives about a 30-minute drive from my house. She's a teacher at a local elementary school, and her kind and dedicated personality makes her popular among her students. Sarah's husband Robert is a capable lawyer, and I often see his hard-working image in the local paper. Their son Timmy, my grandson, is 6 years old and the apple of my eye. His innocent smile and curious nature always bring me happiness and vitality. On weekends, Sarah and her family would visit my house to enjoy a barbecue. Watching Timmy run around energetically in the garden while chatting idly with my daughter and son-in-law, such ordinary, happy moments were our family's daily life. On the surface, they seemed like a comfortable middle-class family, but lately, I had been worried about Sarah. As her mother, I sensed something hidden behind her smile. As the quiet night deepened, I was knitting on the living room sofa. Just as the wall clock was about to strike 11 p.m., my cell phone on the coffee table suddenly rang loudly. Looking at the screen, I saw it was a video call from Sarah. Thinking it was unusual at such a late hour, I answered the phone, but instead of my daughter, I saw Timmy's tear-stained face. "Grandma." Timmy's voice was trembling. "Mom." "Mom's not moving." I caught my breath. As I strained to see the scene behind Timmy, I could make out something spread across the dimly lit floor. The moment I realized it was blood, my heart started pounding fiercely. "Timmy, calm down. Tell Grandma exactly what happened. What's going on?" I asked, desperately trying to keep my composure. "I don't know," Timmy answered, sobbing. "Mom's lying on the floor. There's blood, so much blood." Alarms were ringing in my head. "Where's Dad? Where's your father?" Timmy shook his head. "Dad's not here. He said he'd be late because of work." I felt uneasy about Robert's absence in this situation, but now wasn't the time to dwell on that. I spoke gently, trying to calm Timmy down. "Timmy, listen carefully. Grandma will be there right away. Until then, don't leave Mom's side. But don't touch her, okay? Do you understand?" After confirming Timmy's small nod, I quickly called the police and ambulance. I explained the situation to the operator, who assured me they would dispatch units immediately. As soon as I hung up, I hurriedly prepared to leave. Usually composed, I couldn't think straight this time. I just hastily threw on my coat, grabbed my car keys, and rushed out the door. With the sound of the engine breaking the midnight silence, my car sped into the darkness. My mind was filled with worry for my daughter and grandson. Every time the traffic light turned red, I gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling my chest tighten with anxiety and fear. "Sarah, hang in there. Mom's coming right away," I cried out in my heart. The 30-minute drive felt like an eternity. When I finally arrived in front of Sarah's house, several police cars and ambulances were already parked. The area around the house was a mix of blue and red lights, with neighbors anxiously peering at the scene. With trembling hands, I opened the car door and stumbled towards the house. A police officer tried to stop me at the entrance, but I desperately shouted, "I'm her mother. My daughter and grandson are inside." The officer hesitated for a moment but, seeing my urgent expression, nodded and let me through. The moment I stepped into the house, I was confronted with an unimaginable sight. A sea of bright red blood spread across the living room floor. In the center, Sarah lay face down. Paramedics were bustling around her. And in the corner of the room, Timmy was shaking, held by a police officer. "Sarah!" I couldn't help but cry out. A paramedic stopped me, but his eyes were full of sympathy. "You must be the mother, Martha. Your daughter's condition is critical. We're currently stopping the bleeding and providing emergency treatment." All I could do was nod. As my vision blurred with tears, I turned towards Timmy. He noticed me and slipped out of the officer's arms, running towards me. "Grandma!" Timmy broke down crying in my arms. "Mom! Mom!" I held my grandson tightly, rubbing his back as I said, "It's okay, Timmy. You did so well. It's thanks to you that Grandma could come here." Yes, I was here because Timmy had the courage to call me. Remembering that I had contacted the police and ambulance, I felt renewed gratitude for my grandson's quick thinking. As Timmy's cries began to settle down, a detective approached us. "May I have a word with you?" the detective asked in a gentle tone. I nodded and, still holding Timmy's hand, began answering the detective's questions. He asked about how I learned of the incident, the recent behavior of my daughter and son-in-law, and if there had been anything concerning. That's when Timmy mumbled in a small voice, "Mom said something at the end." We held our breath and focused on him. "Mom said, 'Look at the bookshelf.'" Timmy looked up at us with a confused expression. The detective furrowed his brow and immediately instructed his colleague, thoroughly search the living room bookshelf. Meanwhile, the paramedics were still working diligently on Sarah's emergency treatment. It seemed they had finally managed to control the bleeding and were beginning to move her onto a stretcher. "We're transporting her to the hospital," one of the paramedics informed me. "Will any family member accompany her?" I hesitated for a moment. The desire to go with Sarah conflicted with the responsibility of staying here to look after Timmy. "I'll go with her," an unexpected voice said. Turning around, there stood Robert. All eyes in the room focused on Robert's sudden appearance. He was out of breath, sweat beading on his forehead. It looked as if he had been running at full speed. "What happened?" "Sarah." Robert tried to rush to his wife's stretcher but was stopped by a police officer. "You must be the husband, Robert," the detective said in a calm voice. "Your wife's condition is critical. She's being transported to the hospital now." Robert nodded with a dazed expression. I'll go with her," he said in a shaky voice. After a brief questioning, the police allowed Robert to accompany Sarah to the hospital. Before getting into the ambulance, he came to me. "Martha, please take care of Timmy," he said with a serious look. "I'll call from the hospital as soon as possible." I nodded silently. Robert's behavior seemed exactly like that of a shocked husband. However, I couldn't shake off a feeling that something was off. As the ambulance departed and the initial police investigation continued, I sat on the sofa, still holding Timmy. The detectives were meticulously examining the house, focusing on the bookshelf. "Grandma," Timmy called out in a small voice. "Dad is scary." I looked at my grandson's face in surprise. "Why is he scary, Timmy?" Timmy looked around cautiously before whispering in my ear, "Dad is always angry. Mom is always crying." Those words made my heart ache. I felt like I had caught a glimpse of the darkness in their home that I hadn't noticed before. At that moment, the detective approached us. "We found this in the bookshelf," he said. What he showed me was an ordinary-looking old Bible. However, inside it was a thin piece of paper. It was a safety deposit box access card with Sarah Wilson written on it. I gasped. Why had Sarah hidden such a thing? And why did she say, "Look at the bookshelf," as her last words? It felt like everything was starting to connect. Holding Timmy close, I steeled my resolve. To uncover the truth about my daughter and protect her, I had to solve this mystery. Even if it meant completely overturning our family's way of life. After the detective left, I stared at the bookshelf. Sarah's last words, "Look at the bookshelf," must have a deeper meaning. Finding just the safety deposit box card didn't seem enough. Suddenly, I remembered a conversation with Sarah from a few months ago. I recalled her casual words. "Hey, Mom. If anything happens, look at the book Anderson Family Memories, okay?" At the time, I thought it was just casual conversation, but now it might hold significant meaning. I stood up and approached the bookshelf. "Timmy, will you help Grandma look for a book?" I gently asked my grandson. Timmy nodded slightly, and we began searching for the book together. After a while, we found an old book with Anderson Family Memories written on the spine. When I took out the book, it was heavier than expected. Carefully turning the pages, I found that the center had been hollowed out, hiding a USB drive, a small diary, and several documents. Oh my! I couldn't help but exclaim. When I connected the USB to the computer, multiple folders appeared. One of them was labeled "For Emergency," so I opened it. As Sarah's image appeared on the screen, my heart raced. She looked tired, but her eyes were filled with determination as she looked into the camera. "Mom, if you're watching this video, it means something has happened to me," Sarah's voice resonated. "I'm sorry for keeping quiet for so long. But I can't hide it anymore." She took a deep breath and continued. "Robert, he started becoming violent towards me. At first, it was just verbal abuse, but gradually it escalated." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing an arm covered in bruises. I gasped. Timmy clung to me, looking frightened. "But that's not all. Robert has enormous debts. He's addicted to gambling. He's trying to use up my savings and even the inheritance you left me. Sarah wiped away her tears and continued. This USB contains all the evidence of Robert's violence and debts. I've written everything in detail in the diary, and there are financial documents too. Mom, please, if anything happens to me, give this to the police. And protect Timmy. When the video ended, a heavy silence filled the room. With trembling hands, I opened the diary and witnessed the days of my daughter's suffering firsthand. The financial documents revealed the full extent of Robert's debts. The amount far exceeded my imagination. Grandma. Timmy's small voice was heard. Will Mom be okay? I hugged my grandson tightly. She'll be fine, Timmy. Grandma will make sure of it. At that moment, my resolve solidified. To protect my daughter and grandson, I had to reveal the truth. As soon as dawn broke, I headed to the police station. I left Timmy with our neighbors, the Johnsons, giving them a brief explanation of the situation. At the police station, I met with the detective in charge and submitted all the evidence we had found the night before. The USB contents, the diary, the financial documents, everything pointed to Robert's crimes. This is crucial evidence, the detective said with a serious expression. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for bringing this to us. For the next few hours, I gave a detailed statement. I told them about the changes in Sarah's behavior, Robert's unnatural attitude, and even Timmy's fear, holding nothing back. When our discussion was wrapping up, the detective said, "We're going to call in Robert for questioning. Would you like to be present?" I nodded without hesitation. I wanted to look straight into the face of the man who had hurt my daughter. A few hours later, Robert arrived at the police station. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw us, his body tensed slightly. "What's going on?" Robert asked anxiously. "Has there been any change in Sarah's condition?" The detective calmly replied, "No, we have some questions for you." Then, the detective began to ask detailed questions about Robert's alibi. As contradictions in his statements were found, the detective's tone became more severe. "Were you really just late because of work?" "Of course," Robert answered, looking flustered. "You can ask my colleagues, they'll tell you." However, the police had already checked his story. The colleague Robert mentioned had testified that he wasn't with Robert that night. Robert's face began to change color. "This is a misunderstanding. I didn't do anything." His attitude suddenly changed, and he began to raise his voice. "Martha, why are you doing this?" I calmly replied, "To reveal the truth, Robert." At that moment, the detective brought in new information, testimonies from the neighbors. It seems that screams and noises from the Wilson residence were a common occurrence, the detective told Robert. Furthermore, testimonies from Sarah's colleagues were added. They reported that Sarah often had bruises on her arms and neck, and that she had seemed depressed recently. As Robert heard these testimonies, his attitude became increasingly aggressive. "This is a conspiracy. Everyone's trying to frame me." The detectives calmly restrained Robert and announced, "Robert Wilson, you are under arrest on suspicion of assaulting Sarah Wilson." As I watched Robert being taken away, I was filled with complex emotions. My daughter and grandson would be safe now. But our family structure would change dramatically. As these thoughts conflicted in my mind, the phone rang with a call from the hospital. "Hello, is this Martha Wilson? Your daughter has regained consciousness." The moment I heard those words, tears began to flow from my eyes. A few days after Robert's arrest, I was called to the police station. The detective said he would explain the results of the investigation in detail. "Mrs. Wilson, please have a seat," the detective said with a serious expression. "We've uncovered the full extent of Robert's crimes." I sat down nervously and listened to the detective's report. First, regarding Robert's gambling addiction, it was more serious than we imagined, the detective began, opening a report. His total debt exceeds $500,000. Hearing that amount, I couldn't help but gasp. Despite his high income as a capable lawyer, to have such a large debt. He was pouring everything into online casinos and sports betting. He would always bet large sums on payday. The detective continued his explanation. He was completely cornered. The debt collectors were becoming more aggressive, and some of them were even willing to use illegal means. And then, the most shocking fact was revealed: Robert's terrifying plan. Robert had added a high-value clause to Sarah's life insurance policy. He had arranged for over $2 million to be paid out in the event of her death. My mind went blank. I couldn't believe he was trying to exchange my daughter's life for money. Furthermore, the detective continued, carefully choosing his words, "It seems he was also after the inheritance you left to Sarah." Anger flared up inside me. No way. The detective looked at me sympathetically as he continued. "He seems to have been planning this for a long time. He even had a scenario prepared to make Sarah's death look like an accident." Then, the events of the day of the incident were revealed. Robert had said he would be late due to work and left, but in reality, he had suffered a big loss at the casino. When he returned home, he asked Sarah for money, but she flatly refused. According to witness testimony, loud arguing voices were heard, the detective reported. After that, they heard the sound of something falling and Sarah's scream. After beating Sarah, Robert seemed to have panicked. He tried to cover up the evidence, but that also failed. "Fortunately, Timmy had the presence of mind to contact you," the detective said. That was the decisive factor in saving Sarah's life and exposing Robert's crimes. After hearing the story, I was filled with mixed emotions. Anger, sadness, and a sense of relief all mingled together. "Thank you," I said to the detective. "What happens now?" "Robert will be charged with felonies. He'll be held in custody until the trial," the detective answered. "We'll take responsibility for ensuring the safety of Sarah and Timmy." I nodded. The road ahead won't be easy. But with the truth revealed, I felt like we had taken the first step towards healing. After leaving the police station, I headed straight to the hospital. Since receiving the call that Sarah had regained consciousness, my heart had been filled with the desire to see my daughter's face. When I entered the hospital room, Sarah was lying weakly, but she smiled faintly when she saw me. "Mom." Her voice was hoarse, but it was a sure sign that she was alive. "Sarah, thank goodness," I said, holding back tears as I grasped my daughter's hand. After a moment of silence, Sarah slowly began to speak. "Mom, I'll tell you everything. There's nothing to hide anymore." Sarah began to recount the reality of years of abuse. It started with verbal abuse, which gradually escalated into physical violence. The situation worsened after Robert's debt problems came to light. But I was worried about Timmy. "I couldn't run away," she said, tears streaming down her face. "That's why you started gathering evidence," I said, showing understanding. Sarah nodded. "I thought it might be necessary someday, but I never imagined it would turn out like this." Then she told me about the events of that day. Robert had come home drunk and demanded money. When Sarah refused, he became enraged and started to get violent. I went to the living room to protect Timmy. And then Sarah's voice trailed off. I gently squeezed her hand. Timmy found me, and I mustered my last bit of strength to give him instructions. I told him, "Call Grandma and tell her about the bookshelf." Timmy's brave actions had saved Sarah's life. I was deeply grateful for my grandson's quick thinking. "Timmy, is he okay?" Sarah asked worriedly. "He's fine. He's staying with the Johnsons right now. You'll be able to see him soon," I reassured her. Sarah closed her eyes in relief. "Thank you, Mom. And I'm sorry for making you worry so much." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said firmly. "From now on, we'll get through this together." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes again, but this time they seemed to be tears of relief. Several months have passed since then, and our lives are slowly moving forward. Robert has been indicted on multiple charges, and the trial is ongoing. Given the severity of his crimes, a long prison sentence seems unavoidable. Sarah and Timmy are receiving counseling to heal their emotional wounds. There are difficult days sometimes, but the two of them are supporting each other and moving forward one step at a time. We're truly grateful for the support of our community. The Johnsons and many others have offered kind words and sometimes even prepared meals for us. Through this experience, I've once again realized the importance of family bonds. I cherish the time I spend with Sarah and Timmy and am doing my best to support their recovery. It was a painful experience, but I believe that overcoming this has made our family even stronger. The future may not be smooth sailing, but I'm convinced that with love and trust, we can overcome any difficulty. When I saw Timmy's smile return, I whispered in my heart, "Let's continue to build a happy future together."